In early 2024, a private theological research institute quietly fed the entire Book of Revelation and millennia of expert commentary into a cutting-edge AI to ask one blunt question. Could an unbiased machine detect structural patterns in 2,000 years of interpretation that humans missed? What it returned was precise, statistically striking, and unsettling enough that the analysts who reviewed the output could not easily dismiss what they saw. The Book of Revelation has always been Christianity's most enigmatic text, written by John of Patmos around 95 CE. It bristles with vivid and often terrifying imagery. 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 bowls of wrath, beasts rising from the sea, cosmic battles, and the ultimate remaking of reality. Scholars have argued for centuries whether these images are literal forecasts, symbolic allegory, historical reportage, or a mixture of categories. The research team expected the AI to sort predictions into familiar camps: preterist, historicist, futurist, idealist, but the system's output was sharper and far more specific than anticipated. Grok treated the task as pure pattern detection. It did not start with theological assumptions about literalism or symbolism. Instead, the AI analyzed linguistic structure, mapped recurring motifs, tested multiple chronological arrangements, and correlated textual features with measurable historical events. Its first major conclusion reframed how the prophetic sequences should be read. The seals, trumpets, and bowls are not strictly sequential chapters, but overlapping perspectives on the same era. In other words, the seals initiate judgment, the trumpets escalate it, and the bowls culminate it, and these sequences partially occur concurrently, intensifying one another rather than marching in a linear order. On symbolic numbers, the AI produced a mixed verdict. Some figures behaved as symbolic markers of completeness. Others functioned like literal time identifiers. Terms clustered 42 months, 1,260 days, and times, statistically grouped as a defined 3 NDFL-year interval that the model treated operationally as a period of real duration. By contrast, the 44,000 shows structural and linguistic markers consistent with symbolic completeness rather than a literal head count. This blended literal and symbolic reading resolves contradictions that purely literal or purely symbolic approaches struggle to explain. The analysis then moved from internal structure to external correlation, and here the results became markedly provocative. Grok identified multiple clusters where prophetic imagery and historical phenomena matched with a level of specificity that reviewers found difficult to dismiss as coincidence. The sixth seal's cosmic signs, a great earthquake, the sun darkened, the moon becoming like blood, stars falling aligned with clustered episodes in history, when major earthquakes coincided with volcanic events that darkened skies and meteor phenomena that altered atmospheric optics. These were not random echoes. The AI found temporally tight clusters of such events recurring across history. The trumpet that describes a burning mountain thrown into the sea, turning a third of the sea to blood and killing a third of marine life, correlated with episodes reminiscent of asteroid impacts, cataclysmic volcanic eruptions triggering tsunamis, and modern drivers of oceanic dead zones caused by ecological collapse. Again, Grok's matches were not casually associative, but emerged from statistical patterns linking textual motifs to real-world physical processes. More unnerving were contemporary correlations. The AI detected convergent trends in global finance, political consolidation, surveillance technology, biometric identity systems, and environmental deterioration that map closely onto Revelation's architecture of global control and catastrophic disruption. Digital currencies, centralized identity frameworks, and biometric authentication, all under rapid development, could enable precisely the kind of economic exclusion Revelation warns about, a system where buying and selling depends on a central mark or identification. Meanwhile, global telecommunications make instantaneous, world-wide witnessing of events trivial in a way that would have been inconceivable for earlier interpreters. The AI also reinterpreted military imagery through a modern lens. The prophetic army from the East, numbered at 200 million, once dismissed as hyperbolic, becomes plausibly read as a demographic marker. The mobilizable military-age population in certain regions today makes those numbers conceivable as signals of mass mobilization potential rather than descriptions of ancient legion sizes. Patterns of persecution and martyrdom, economic disruption, and technological acceleration also displayed cyclical intensifications, consistent with prophetic language about birth pains increasing over time. Grok's broadest structural finding was a pattern of cyclical escalation. The model identified 7 major cycles since the first century, each spanning centuries, but showing a trend toward shorter, sharper cycles characterized by concurrent wars, famine, earthquakes, persecution, economic turmoil, cultural rot in dominant civilizations, and technological advances that knit the world together. Each cycle contained phases of birth pains, escalation, temporary respite, and renewed intensification, and the overall trajectory across cycles showed acceleration. Critically, the AI concluded we are now inside the final cycle, one in which all the pattern elements are present simultaneously at an unprecedented global scale. Treating the repeated 3 and Botif as a literal interval within larger cycles, Grok projected a terminal 7-year window, 2 halves of roughly 5 years each, the second half far more severe, and placed the likely onset of that 7-year period between 2025 and 2030, with 2027 emerging as the single most probable pivot year. Depending on the chosen start date, the culminating events would fall in a 2032 to 2037 window. Analysts were initially skeptical, and with good reason. Revelation has a long history of failed prognostications. Pattern recognition can generate seductive but spurious correlations, and statistical significance alone does not prove prophetic fulfillment. The research team knew these pitfalls and framed their publication carefully. AI reveals structure and correlation, not metaphysical validation. Yet reviewers found the analysis unusually rigorous, built from linguistic parsing, structural mapping, cross-textual comparison, and correlation with quantifiable historical data, producing a coherent output rather than a grab bag of cherry-picked parallels. The methodology aligned in places with established scholarship. The reading of parallel, rather than strictly sequential prophetic sequences, resonates with prior scholarly proposals. The mixed literal symbolic account of numbers solves interpretive tensions, and the cyclical escalation model dovetails with biblical images of increasing birth pains. Still, the specificity of the timeline and the breadth of modern correlations made the work discomforting because it converted centuries of ambiguous imagery into testable temporal claims. Technology amplified that discomfort. The AI reframed Revelation's beast, not simply as an individual ruler or empire, but as a convergent system. Central bank digital currencies, biometric ID networks, AI-powered surveillance, social credit governance models, and transnational regulation that together could function as integrated global control infrastructure. These building blocks exist now in various stages and could be assembled rapidly by policy decisions, crisis responses, or technological momentum. Environmental trends reinforce the pattern. Climate models, expanding ocean dead zones, widespread water contamination, extreme heat events, and compounding ecological collapses could produce catastrophic conditions matching Revelation's imagery within the time frame the AI projected. Geopolitical realignments, concentrated regional power, strategic flashpoints, and intensifying global tension also mapped onto the prophetic pattern the model extracted. Faced with these findings, the team debated ethics, responsibility, and publication. Releasing a timeline that specific risked sensationalism, politicization by apocalyptic movements, and dismissal as techno-theology gimmickry. Yet suppressing the analysis felt irresponsible. The AI's claims invited scholarly scrutiny and public debate precisely because they generated falsifiable predictions. They published a carefully worded paper focused on method, data, and caveats. The paper emphasized that pattern detection does not equate to prophetic validation. Correlation is not causation, and timelines should be treated as analytical outputs open to falsification, rather than divine proclamations. Reaction split predictably. Some conservative circles seized the timeline as imminent confirmation. Skeptics mocked the approach, and a number of biblical scholars acknowledged that the structural insights were worth serious attention even as they rejected deterministic readings. The analysis reopened thorny theological questions. If AI extracts date ranges from textual patterns, does this conflict with Jesus' statement that no one knows the day or hour of his return? The researchers argued that forbidding exact hour and minute predictions does not preclude discerning seasons or eras. Historically, believers have been instructed to watch for signs. Critics countered that reducing prophecy to computational pattern detection strips it of its spiritual, ethical, and revelatory dimensions, treating sacred text as data and overlooking the moral purpose of prophecy. What truly unnerved many analysts was not the claim that the apocalypse had been proven, but that an impartial algorithm had created a rigorous, specific, and testable timeline that could be evaluated within contemporary timeframes. The AI identified over 200 correlations. It judged statistically significant claims that can be assessed against future events. If the predicted escalation window between 2025 and 2030 begins to manifest the intensifications Grok outlined, scholars will need to explain why an unbiased algorithm saw what human interpreters did not. If the window passes with no corresponding intensification, the study will stand as a cautionary tale about how powerful pattern finding methods can construct compelling, but ultimately false narratives. Either outcome is discomforting. If the patterns are meaningful, it suggests that ancient apocalyptic texts encode deep historical dynamics that modern computation can reveal. If the patterns are noise, it demonstrates how plausible and persuasive mathematically elegant correlations can be when applied to rich, ambiguous datasets. If the convergence is coincidence, the statistical improbability still leaves unease. Beyond prophetic claims, the study confirmed a different fear. The contemporary world is structurally capable of producing the scenarios Revelation describes. Instant global communication enables shared witnessing. Digital finance and centralized identity systems could enforce exclusionary economic control. Surveillance and AI magnify the reach of institutional power. Environmental fragilities and geopolitical tensions could trigger rapid systemic collapse. Whether by prophetic design or human failure, these converging trajectories make profound global transformation more plausible within decades rather than centuries. Grok produced a timeline placing the culminating events between roughly 2032 and 2037, and that timetable, rigorous, specific, and falsifiable, is what unsettled the analysts who reviewed it. They were not frightened because a machine had proven the end. They were unsettled because an impartial algorithm produced a coherent, high-resolution map of patterns culminating within a time frame many of them feel they might live to see. The critical question is not merely whether Grok's dates prove prophecy, it is what our world is building that could make such a scenario possible. An unbiased machine read 2,000 years of apocalypse and return to time